Hello, my dear viewers, my explorers of the unknown. Taylor here, your casual crypt keeper, and your guide to the world of terror lying just beneath the surface. You know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, if that's the case, then my ghouls and goblins, today I'm going to be offering you 5,000 words worth of terror, which is a pretty fair exchange rate if you ask me. So come, stay a while, pull up a chair, toss a log on the fire, knock back a cup of something cold, and let's take a journey as we look at top 5 haunting photos you were never meant to see. Let me know down below in the comments which of these bizarre portraits of madness spoke to you. Number 5. Charlie No Face. Now, what you're looking at right now isn't a special effect or CGI or a monster from a movie, but a real life ghost story. The man in this photo is named Raymond Robinson, but was better known to locals as No Face Charlie or the Green Man due to the discoloration of his skin. For the residents of Pennsylvania, he was a real life ghost. When Raymond was very young, he was injured in an accident involving a power line nearly fatally, and in this accident it took his eyes, his nose, and his arm. Because of the nature of his injuries, Raymond grew up in isolation for fear that his macabre appearance would scare people off. So he kept to himself as much as he possibly could. He rarely left the house, except for night walks along the highway with a stick to help him feel around. Now, rumors of a man with no face who only walks around at highways at night pretty quickly spiraled into urban legend territory because, to its credit, it does sound pretty made up. And Raymond caught the name around town of No Face Charlie. Locals would try to track him down to get photos to gawk at the monster. Sometimes people would call the police when they saw him, thinking that they'd seen a monster that needed to be stopped. But it wasn't all bad. Local high schoolers really responded to the stories of No Face Charlie and would oftentimes drive out at night to keep Raymond company, to share drinks and other goodies with him to improve a lonely life. No matter how unsettling someone might look, there is always a person underneath it all, and a story behind it too. And if you like scary stories, my viewers, well, then you are in the absolute perfect place on YouTube right now because we have got loads of them. Click through for lots more, or stay subscribed for more in the future. Let's keep going. Number 4. Maori trophy heads. I hate to have to be the one to tell you this, but what you're looking at is not a collector posing in front of a bunch of masks. He's a collector, yeah, but the man is showing off his collection of trophy heads. The man in question is Major General Horatio Gordon Robley. Whew, that is a mouthful and a half. He was serving in the British military at the time that this photo was taken, and he was fascinated by the Maori people of New Zealand where he was stationed. Specifically their tradition of face tattoos called moko. Moko was usually done to indicate who were high members of society or who had some renown. When a man with moko passed, it was a cultural practice to preserve the work by mummifying a severed head, removing the eyes and brain, sealing the whole thing together with flax fiber, gum, and shark oil. Horatio was absolutely fascinated by this when he arrived in New Zealand in the 1860s. Proving what a very normal, well-adjusted guy he was, he quickly started collecting the tattooed severed heads, called mokamokai. He would trade firearms and other goods to Maori locals in exchange for his heads, eventually boasting an impressive collection of 35 heads. Apparently he was quite proud of them, posing for photos with them proudly like the image we just showed. It's really interesting to me how this guy found a way where collecting heads was socially acceptable, I guess. Eventually, I guess Horatio got bored of being the head guy, or someone rightfully explained to him that actually it's not normal to have a collection of 35 severed heads, because he tried to sell them back to the New Zealand government, which is one of the most British things I've ever heard. In the end, they wouldn't end up in New Zealand, but now the morbid cabinet of curios found its way to the American Museum of National History, where it was sold for a modest £1,000. Number 3. Human dolls. I've always found big dolls pretty creepy. Anything bigger than a Barbie, really. These dolls in these photos in particular really set something off in my brain. And if you're wondering just why there's something about this that's creeping you out so much that you can't quite put your finger on, I'll let you know. It's not just the outdated decor, it's probably because these dolls were made by Anatoly Moskvin, a Russian former journalist who had a hobby of making dolls out of human bodies that he dug up. Anatoly was apparently fascinated by death, stemming, he says, from a truly bizarre incident where as a young boy he was walking home and he was apprehended by men in black suits who ushered him to a funeral and then made him kiss the forehead of the body being buried. The girl's grieving mother put a wedding ring on her daughter's body and then gave another ring to Anatoly. This marriage, I guess, propelled him into a lifelong obsession with death and cemeteries, with Anatoly claiming that he probably knew more about cemeteries than anyone else in his hometown of Nizhny Novgorod, which was probably probably unfortunately true. In late 2009, graves all around Nizhny Novgorod were being dug up, with loved ones complaining that when they went to mourn, the graves that they had come to pay respects to had been defiled. Anatoly was quickly caught, and police searched his home, where they discovered his horrifying collection of life-size dolls. The house was laid out like something out of a horror movie. Debris and garbage piled everywhere, and 26 life-size dolls strewn all over the apartment. Police reported that some of them had music boxes embedded in them and would play music when they're being moved. Moskvin said he made the dolls because he was lonely and wished that he could have children of his own, as he was not allowed to adopt because he didn't make enough money. And I'm gonna be honest, that probably was for the best. His parents, who lived with him, claimed that they had no knowledge of the true nature of his hobby, dismissing their son's odd habit as just a strange pastime. Number 2. Two-headed dogs. A dog is man's best friend, it's been said. And they say 2 heads are better than 1, so with these 2 concepts in mind, the only thing better as a best friend for a man would be a 2-headed dog. Luckily for us, Russian scientist Vladimir Demikhov agreed with this thought process and tried to make his own 2-headed dog. I'll be honest, if you get squeamish about stuff involving dogs or pets, I'd skip over this part of the video. The timestamp will be down there since it's pretty creepy stuff. Anyway, jumping in. It's hard not to call Vladimir Demikhov a mad scientist, especially when you see the photos from his workshop. It looks like behind the scenes footage from a horror movie, and your brain wants to believe so badly that what you're looking at is CGI or maybe a puppet. But no, that's a real 2-headed dog, horrible as it was, that he created. Demikhov was fascinated by organ transplants and tried to further what medicine could do, with dogs as his preferred test subjects. His magnum opus and goal was to successfully transplant a head onto another human being, with the eventual goal being a full-scale head transplant. Now, for all his controversial methods, he actually did further modern medicine a great deal, and his work was essential to what we know now about modern organ transplants. He's credited with creating the world's first artificial heart, as well as the first lung and heart transplants ever performed. But head transplants were the ultimate goal. Any old fool can put lungs in somebody else, and he believed firmly if he could get it to work on a dog, he could make it work on a man. He performed this experiment 23 times with no success. I would have thrown in the towel by the 23rd dog hybrid, but it was his 24th time where he would find some success at an international audience as well as infamy. A smaller dog was grafted to a German Shepherd by the head and neck, and the operation took 3 hours, and miraculously the dog survived, and this poor creature could see, hear, smell, eat, and swallow. In the end, and probably for the best, this thing only survived for 4 days after this. Demikhov continued his experiments, eventually creating a 2-headed dog that lived for 29 days, his lasting record. Unsurprisingly, his work was met with great concern over the ethics and the nature of his experiments, which is, very understandable since, you're kind of doing what Frankenstein does, just sewing dogs together. That's usually something people take umbrage with. Some scientists believe today that a head transplant is closer to reality than we might think. Number 1. Dyatlov Pass Incident. At first, this picture might not be as horrifying as some of the other ones I've shown you. We got a pretty creepy bunch here. This one's got a creepy atmosphere to it for sure, but it's in more of a liminal way than pictures of a guy with no eyes or 2-headed dogs. But what makes this picture so downright unsettling is that this is the last photo ever taken of the 9 hikers who vanished in the Dyatlov Pass incident, one of the strangest unsolved mysteries on record. This photo was taken February 1st, 1959, the day that the group was thought to have died. For some backstory, in 1959, a group of experienced hikers set out to climb Otorten, a mountain in the north of Soviet Russia. The leader of the expedition, Alexeyevich Dyatlov, promised that he would send a telegram from the peak to his sports club. The telegram never arrived, and the men were never heard from again. Weeks passed without any word from the hikers, and authorities set out to try and find them, succeeding after weeks of searching. But what they found did not conclude anything and only made matters stranger. The group's bodies had been ravaged and displaced. Some of the people had eyes and tongues missing, while others had been destroyed in a way that seemed like they'd been struck by a car. The bodies were scattered all across the mountain, leading to much more confusion. They had found a tent from the group that had been cut open from the inside, and scattered around the campsite were boots, coats, and gear that had seemingly been left behind in a hurry after some members of the group had fled somewhere. From what is anyone's guess. 2 of the bodies that had been discovered weren't wearing clothes at all, despite the obviously freezing conditions conditions around them. Every single new piece of evidence that authorities found only seemed to further the mystery. Some of the bodies were disfigured, some of the bodies were found wearing clothes that clearly belonged to other bodies that had been scavenged or looted. There were small amounts of radiation detected on the clothes of the found hikers. Everything was like pieces of a puzzle that just didn't fit together. The Dyatlov Pass incident is rife for conspiracists, and there are many great videos out there on the subject and lots of cool stuff to read. It's fascinating. The theories range from anything from supernatural involvement or hysteria and madness or government secret projects. Were they attacked out in the woods by something or someone? There were some who believed it could have been an attack from a local tribe called the Mansi who lived in the surrounding mountains. But the tribe was peaceful, so it was unlikely. As well, the damage that had been done to the bodies was so severe, it was described as being closer to car crash injuries than it was human inflicted. An avalanche seemed like the most prevailing theory. It would make sense why it would scare the hikers awake in the night, ripping open the tent and causing them to flee unprepared, but avalanches weren't particularly common in that area, and furthermore, the hikers present were all fairly experienced, and unlikely to make a mistake like camping somewhere near the danger of an avalanche. More extreme theories posit that the group was exposed to some sort of new weapon that was being tested, as a possible explanation for the radiation and bizarre injuries. In the end, officially, the hikers' deaths were ruled as natural force. But anyone involved knew that there was more to the story. The case was actually reopened in 2019, fairly recently, reaffirming the belief that what happened was an avalanche that split the group up and led them to trying to survive in the mountains for a few days valiantly. That's the news story, and whether or not that's the truth, we may never know. And that's all for this video, my ghouls and goblins. Thanks so much for watching. Creep on creeping on, and I'll see you in the next one.